order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the best extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner: by finding the meeting at https://www.southboroughtown.com /remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So, that being said, the first item on the agenda was to approve the minutes.
I see Mark Murphy's in the audience now.
Tim, can you promote Mark Murphy? Nice. Thank you. Hi, Mark. Mark, you're on mute. And there's Freddie too. Okay. So Mark and Freddie, just so you know, I just read the Governor Baker's ruling. So we're past that. We're getting to the approval of the minutes. And I was waiting to see if there would be a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written for November the 19th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Mills, yes. Dorian?
Jasinski, yes.
Ben?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Mark? Did we lose him? Okay. And Ann, did you get sworn in?
I did get appointed last night, and they didn't mention anything about getting sworn in.
You don't have to be sworn in anymore right now because of COVID. So that
Okay.
means you're appointed. You're on the
Okay.
But I will abstain from voting on this because I actually haven't seen the minutes.
Okay. No problem. Mark, do you want to vote to approve the minutes? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I am in favor of accepting the minutes as written.
All right. So that is everyone with one abstention. Perfect. So we got that done. So the update on fiscal year 2021 annual town meeting articles. So Freddie, you were going to go over this, correct? Oh, no, sorry, the 2021 meetings articles. So we have a carryover, a couple from last year. Well, one was for the rec department for the Calander Field to get redone. That had all been voted on. So, and then all got pushed. I think the members that were here before, Mark, Ben, and Dorian, that was all approved by the CPC to go forward to town meeting for a vote. And at this point, we're still waiting for the town meeting to actually have that and review. So there's that one. And then the other one was the church, the St. Mark's Church Tower clock, where we were putting that forth to the town to review and decide if it was worth funding.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt you, but we never discussed the letter we received from the Freedom from Religion Foundation with a possible lawsuit against the town if we go forward with that bell tower. So I think that we really need to discuss that before we actually go forward with that warrant article. I think that this deserves some type of a discussion, this letter. And we've never discussed it.
Okay. Ben, we hadn't talked about this, but I'm going to recuse myself if you guys want to discuss it now, because I am a member of the church. So we can do that now. And
Sure, certainly.
so I will recuse
I'm a
myself.
member of the church as well, if I need to recuse myself.
Can I weigh in here for a second? I think, this is Freddie. My understanding is that the warrant has been published. And certainly the discussion can happen, but I think you may need to ask town council how you would even go about taking a warrant article off an already published warrant. So
We'd have
just
to
be aware of
take it
that.
off on the town floor, but we could do that on the town floor if we chose to.
You can do it on the town meeting floor.
Yep.
If you chose to, but town meeting has to vote to allow that to happen, I believe.
I believe
Right,
the
and-
warrant is published for the new town meeting coming up in April or May.
True. I don't know how, because it was technically published last year, so I'm not sure if it's already guaranteed to be in there or if this is all new being published.
It's what the communication we got from the Mark Purple and the selectmen is that the warrant articles that were postponed are automatically on. And I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying you may, whether it's Mark Purple or town council, who'll have to weigh in to tell you what you would want to do about any future decision on this.
Dorian, is this a letter that's been received since, or when was this received? I just want to make sure we're referring to what I think we're referring to.
It's the letter that we all received. Every member of the board received a copy of this letter from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. The letter is dated March 16th, 2020. So just as COVID started and everything started getting shut down. So probably the reason we haven't discussed it. But we haven't discussed this, and they are threatening to sue the town. And my memory is John Butler gave a presentation to us telling us about how this group did sue the town of Ashland and won in court, and it cost the town over $250,000 to fight them. So my question is, we really need to take a look at this letter. We need to have a very hard discussion as a group whether we want to go forward with this warrant article. We have the right to pull the warrant article. The warrant has not been published yet. There's a placeholder literally for that Calander Field. I mean, it's not published yet. This is serious. And I don't want to be put in a position of setting the town up for a massive lawsuit.
We had a pretty extensive discussion about certainly the threat from the Freedom from Religion group. And I remember well Mr. Butler's presentation to us. I think the committee's decision was that this is a decision that's impactful enough and important enough that it deserves to go before a town meeting, where the proponent can say their piece, and those who think it's a terrible idea, Mr. Butler, I suspect, would be one of them, can also say their piece, and in town meeting can render its sort of collective wisdom on the subject. I think that's where we fell out. I recall that we were not did not have unanimous vote. I may be wrong on that.
I was the only dissenting vote, but Ben, we received this letter after that vote was taken. So
Okay.
this letter is new. This board has never discussed this letter. We've never brought this up in a meeting because we haven't been meeting because we didn't have a quorum. But this letter came after that vote. The warrant articles were pushed off until the next town meeting because of COVID. We have an opportunity as a board to discuss this letter and the ramifications of going forward with that warrant article. And I think this is extremely important. This group has already proven that they follow through with their threats. So as a board who's putting this warrant article forward, we should be discussing this possible threat of a lawsuit against the town. So I'm just saying, I'm only one member of this board, but to me, this is very important and we should be discussing it, not just saying, well, we'll just go forward and see what the town does with it. I think we should be discussing this, but you are, I'm only one member of this board, but I have to, you guys all know me very well. I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking and I'm going to say what's on my mind. So I feel very strongly we should be discussing this.
I know several of us are new, so could we share that letter so we can see what this is? And then maybe even I don't even think I saw the warrant article last year, but I haven't seen like the application for this. So maybe it's worth resharing the applications from last year with the new people. And then I don't know, is this something that we can ask for some advice or opinion from our legal counsel or Board of Selectmen or Mark Purple even?
We previously got a legal opinion from Aldo,
Okay.
and we can prior to the receipt of this March 16th letter, we can certainly forward that to you. And I think it would be entirely appropriate to ask for, having received this new letter to see if that has any impact on his legal opinion.
Okay. Yeah.
So a question for Freddie, schedule-wise, because we have so many new members who need time to review this, do we have time to hold off until our next meeting to have this discussion so that everyone can get up to speed and read all the correspondence?
So I would double check what I am saying, but my understanding is those warrant articles held from last year are automatically on the warrant. We don't have to revote them for them to get on the warrant. Which is not to say what Dorianne is bringing up and having that discussion can't also happen. So I will double check, but based on that, my understanding is yes, there's time, because anything you're going to do with this warrant article would have to be done on town meeting floor in my best knowledge at this moment. What this article was on, these were on the agenda because you have outstanding obligations in the budget. And I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that even if town meeting doesn't understand it, you have to have the money available in case they do, or in case you went forth. I would suggest that if this, the committee so decides, we get the applications out to everyone again, and so that everyone can review them, and then maybe have not the full presentation unless you desire it, but I think, to allow St. Mark's to be invited to that conversation at a future meeting, knowing that I think we have a little more time than the regular warrant articles.
Okay.
But so everyone can get up to speed, but I'm seeing nodding heads. You can't see mine, but I just think, thorough discussion is needed, not just this agenda item tonight. But I did want you to know, and you'll see it in the budget later, that you have to set aside the money for this, or, may not be spent, but you need to make sure that it's available in case.
I guess I would propose then that we, after circulating all these documents, discuss it at the next meeting, and then at that meeting, we could perhaps conduct a vote whether we think it's necessary to get an updated legal opinion from Aldo. And then after receiving that, we can decide if we're going to be taking any action on town meeting floor to pull the article or whatever. How does that sound, particularly to Ann, Jennifer, and David?
May I suggest, if there's time, that you don't do it at the next meeting because you have current business that needs to get done before this warrant article, and if there's
Okay.
time, that you might put it to the one after these warrant articles have to get in.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I will
Is,
double check on the timing and get back to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. So, do folks generally feel comfortable with that?
I do. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
I mean,
And
I
I
think
think we
the
have a-
ultimate issue is there something that should make us reconsider and pulling the article?
Yeah.
No matter what that decision is, the contents of that letter and the possibility of a lawsuit should absolutely be discussed at town meeting. I mean,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Question, do you want to ask Mark Purple for if town council should weigh in on that letter now, or do you want to wait till after you discuss it?
If we have to wait 2 meetings before we really even have the discussion, I think it'd be better to get the ball rolling with town council. This is, it's going to come up on town meeting floor anyway. What does town council say about all of this? Let's, if it gets that far, I think that's
So,
a good idea, Freddie.
so I think that's for the chair to do, so that would be you, Ben, maybe?
Yeah, I think I'm
work
an
with you
acting
on
chair
that.
right now. Oh, okay, so,
Acting, I should say acting chair, because.
Yeah.
But I'll work with you on that as well.
okay, great.
Sorry for the barking dog.
Quite all right.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Sorry, I just felt it was really important.
Oh, understood, Dorian. Yeah, I remember, when we cast the vote, before I voted, I said, I wouldn't be voting for it on town meeting floor, but, I wanted to, give the town meeting the chance. I too was conflicted on it, and I completely understand.
I feel.
Okay, well, we've got a plan going forward on that, so I think we can move along to our next agenda item, and I can turn things back over to Andrew.
Hi, thank you, Ben. So the next one, MOUs. So memorandum of understanding. Let's see, Freddie, did you send those out to everyone? The MOUs that we had?
I got them.
Yeah, she did.
It's, sorry, it was last minute. A few things came out last minute. I sent 2. One is a blank and one was a example of one for one of the approved projects. And one of the things on the old warrant article items also had MOUs. When I send out the applications for the last ones, you may want to be looking at those, because we never finalized MOUs for those projects, what you would think should be in there. I'm backtracking, but I'm seeing
So,
confused faces, sorry.
well, so for Jennifer and David, when we've approved projects in the past, we got the very detailed application that comes through. We review it. There's lots of discussion that goes back and forth with the applicant, and there are things that we understand are going to happen during the process. Like, let's just say, for instance, if we're going to redo 2 tennis courts, that we actually do 2 tennis courts, not that it gets changed later and we find out after the fact that it's more, they got a better deal to just do 1, and someone comes back later with another request to do the tennis court we thought already got done. So that's just an example that actually happened.
Don't worry, Jen.
So I'm just saying, sorry, Jen, I'm not.
Poor Jen.
So the idea behind it is you can't fit everything into the warrant article of, we don't want it to look like, I forget which warrant article it is. It's like 4 pages long with all these specific pieces. I think it's usually has to do with salaries or something like that. or the hiring policy of the town. So the memorandum of understanding was something that we started putting in place so that the applicant knew that, like, okay, yeah, you're going to stick to what the application said. And, you know, as I was talking with Freddie recently about this too, maybe similar to the planning board puts, you know, conditions in, that we could put bullets specific to a project that say, you know, we'll say, I don't know, that could just be like conditions for a project, such as, hey, if the townhouse, we do the townhouse, that you have to redo the windows and restore them. You can't put replacement windows in. Or if the historic society, if we do that, then, you know, if you're going to redo the roof, it's got to be done in slate instead of just, you know, asphalt. Yeah, I'm just throwing things out as examples. But we could do bullets in there and say, hey, this is our understanding, and, you know, it might be not specifically stated in the application, but these were requirements that we're making, or everyone understands is going to actually happen when the project gets complete. And we can check as we go through that actually happens as a project happens.
If you look at the one I sent, and it was for one of my projects, so it's not putting anyone on the spot here. It had requirements for, it was on the golf course. We needed the CR holder to be okay. We had to get the wetland permits from the Conservation Commission. Those things were called out in there. That was, you know, an early attempt at trying to do these types of things that the CPC in their conversation, because a lot of times the presentations, the discussion goes further than what's in the application, and it doesn't always get documented in the application. You know, another version. So it's sort of a good example, or a beginning example.
It's an effort to limit discretion, you know, whether it's a legitimate misinterpretation or someone really is trying to stretch what they want to do with the money.
And what we do is we craft these with the applicant. There are no surprises that come out in these. It's something we work together with them to put down the list of expectations, and we're memorializing the discussion that we have.
So
Also, can I just add one thing that happens too, is sometimes when you go through the review with advisory and the selectmen, they come up with things that to get their approval, people start to agree that, yes, that's what will happen. And you kind of want that. We added something in once on that as well.
So I think one reason we had this on there is to bring everyone up to speed on that, and the addition of adding bullet points of, like, you know, conditions going forward for the project. You know, I think one thing might be an example. Oh, the other thing I want to say, Jen, also, I mean, I mentioned the tennis courts. Not to say that things can't change. I mean, we understand that after, when things go out of bid, things can change. But, you know, it'd be best if the applicant comes back, and I'm saying this broadly to just in general of the entire process, they come back, meet with us as on the CPC and say, hey, look, you know, things have changed. The prices were a lot more expensive. We can only do one. Well, is it okay if we make this adjustment and we're not surprised, you know, after the fact?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's actually the same policy that we follow on the Arts Council when we issue grants. And I actually wonder, like, there's some wording from the Arts Council that we use that also tells them that, like, before they spend any money or before they do anything, to like put it in writing and submit it and then review it with them. And I wonder if maybe adding some of that more explicit language in this document would help as well. Because I know it says, like, it has to be approved prior to release of funds. But I mean, does that mean before we release the funds or before they go and spend the money? So things like that, I think on this, we might be able to get a little bit tighter on the language. that like this is what will happen, and if you want to make any changes or foresee any, to have them bring that forward first. Or maybe even some of the other things, like I know Freddie Rex been learning that we need to talk to you about when our projects are starting and when we expect to be paying bills. So maybe even adding some of that to this would be helpful too. So
Can I jump in? Just to be clear, that's not necessarily for me. It's supposed to be communicating with the CPC.
right, sorry, I just meant the fact that like
I just
Freddie,
want to be
you
clear
and
of my
Andrew
role.
and we've been having conversations. Yeah.
Yes, and also before we came up with the MOU, we had a letter. Do you remember those letters that we would send out to every applicant? And it requires like updates and before they spend money to come in and talk to us and give us a timeline. Those things have been communicated when the applications were approved, but we thought we needed to go to this next step, which is a
Okay.
signed document to be, so there's no surprises or people didn't say they didn't see the letter or whatever happens sometimes.
Okay.
Well, maybe
But yeah.
we should make it a condition that they have to come back in and update us on what's going on, where they're at, progress before we pay any money. And then, I don't know, Ben, do we have liaisons that actually go and look at the projects to see that they are happening the way they're supposed to be? Or is that not something?
We do. And to Jennifer's point, also with something that Andrew said, you know, this is sort of similar to conditioning a planning board approval. I think Jennifer had some very good ideas, and similar to what planning and conservation do, we have lists of standard conditions that apply to all projects, and we put these standard conditions in our MOU template, to which we add special conditions, I guess we could call them, relative to a particular project. That way we could capture some of the things that you mentioned, which I think would be a good idea. And the things that were in the letter that Freddie was talking about that we formerly would send out to projects, we'd keep it all sort of together in one spot.
And the intent is to have the MOU agreed upon and signed before it goes to town meeting. Or voted on in town meeting, I should say. So I think, Jen, if you can send out the copy or a draft of what you have without, specifics on an applicant, that'd be great. We can leverage
Yeah.
that.
I can share that.
And then I know, Mark, you worked on the original draft of the MOU. Do you want to take the lead on maybe adjusting it a little bit with what comes out of Jen's, and then
Sure.
we can review that and hopefully get that buttoned up before we have any project votes. That'd be great. At least with standard wording. I mean, we'll definitely talk about it one more time, or maybe more before we vote. But if we can kind of set the expectation when we vote and with an applicant on the meeting, then they know what to expect right off the bat, at least with the standards. Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's see. Any more on that, Freddie? Or anyone else on the MOU? If not, then we'll go over to the budget. So Freddie's going to try to, we'll see if we can get her to share her screen. Tim, can you promote Freddie's so she can share her screen?
Yep, I've already made her a co-host, so she should be okay. Freddie, let me know if it's not there.
I'm sorry, I had one of those afternoons, and when I hit share screen, will I just be able to open that and not share everything on my screen?
Yep, when you hit
get to
share
choose.
screen, you'll get choices of which screen currently
All
open
right.
on your computer to click.
I think this is the right one. So if I click on, are you guys seeing this? Wow.
Yes.
Yep.
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 I'm seeing my document recovery screen too. That's because I was crashing all over the place. So ignore that. I'm going to put you guys right over it. All right. So we have some new members who haven't been through this process before. So this is when people start to get glassy eyed or roll their eyes, but you should be able to get it. Okay. So the first thing we do is we take and we estimate next year's surcharge, and it's an estimate. And I talk it over with the town treasurer to be sure we're in the ballpark. And this is still very much a draft, okay? So do you see where it says estimate? Can you see my cursor? That's helpful if you can.
Yes.
Okay, so 386, 300. That's what we estimate our surcharge will be this year. Sorry, this is for fiscal year 22, right? And then I'm coming over here to the state match. So this is a little confusing. In the fall of fiscal year 22, we get a state match, but it's based on the surcharge from the year before, because they don't, that's how they figure out how to match it. So it's a little bit, it's off, right? So we're not estimating a surcharge on the 386, but we're estimating the surcharge on what we estimated the budget would be last year. Is everyone kind of getting that? I'm only seeing a few heads, but yell out if you don't understand. So if you come over
Freddie,
here,
Freddie, is it just a typo? Should that line 12 where it says F22 surcharge estimate state match, should that, it says 376, line 12, C, cell C. Shouldn't that match what you have in row 4, G?
I'm sorry, where are you?
The other highlighted number you have, 386, 300.
Yeah, no,
Those two shouldn't match?
no, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so right here. This is last year's fiscal, do I have the wrong number? This is what we budgeted last year, right?
It says fiscal year 22 surcharge. Maybe that's what's confusing me.
Yeah, sorry. Fiscal year. These numbers are backwards. Fiscal year 21 surcharge to state match fiscal year 22. Sorry, I switched those. All right.
Thank you.
So in this year, we're matching last year's surcharge. We'll get a state match in the fall of 1921, which is fiscal year 22, right? We'll get a state match based on what we budgeted at last town meeting. You don't really need, you'll start to understand it, but it's just, that's why the number's different. So that comes up with, I discussed it with Andrew. What the state matches is always kind of a guessing game, and we get notices from the Community Preservation Coalition that we're a member of, that are a statewide organization. And the problem is we're always doing this budgeting before the state has any clue. So last year, well, anyhow, so we're estimating 20% for a state match. And that comes out to 275, which is up here. Normally that's the end of our budgeting. It's, if you're close, it's, you don't have to take, you don't have to do this adjustment. But if you come up here, we received last year's state match in November, and it was for 104,523. Up here, see that 104?
Yep.
That's what we got. But at town meeting, we had been conservative and we had only estimated 54,000. Some of this is because new law passed that they bumped up how the surcharge fund was added to. I think they raised the rates of the deed every time a deed is passed in a certain percentage of the, or a certain amount, I think it was $20, it went up. So there's more money going in. So that should be steady, except for what happens is, you know, real estate markets come and go, and then more towns sign up. We have 9 new towns next year coming on. So we weren't comfortable going with the 28%. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, nodding heads. So we're estimating total receipts is 511,551. Does everyone follow me there? All right. So then these are what we call the buckets. They're the set asides that can only be used for the category they're in. So that's housing, it's community housing, historical, or open space.
And
Now,
this is required by law that we have to do a set aside community. So this has to get done.
and then we're allowed to put 5% into admin, which is how I'm paid. Betsy, additionally, we can fund some small projects that are,
I wouldn't say they're projects. They're
yeah, I
more like,
wouldn't call it, sorry.
it's like small pieces to see if a project can even happen. So one thing was like we were looking to possibly set funds aside to do like help possibly buy some land in town, and if it needed to get surveyed or something like that, or if you know we needed to help get a designation on a building to make it historic before we could make it you know a project, something along those lines. Not that it's actually a full project.
Right,
But-
sorry, I said that.
Yeah.
And it's very specific. We haven't used it often for anything. And what happens is any money that's not utilized goes back into the general reserve fund at the end of the year. So it's there if we need it for specific things to help make another project go through. So you're not waiting for town meeting to not be able to get the background survey type work you need. So that gives us 179,043 total in set asides. And I just want to say that you'll notice recreation does not have a set aside. Originally, when CPA was created, the legislation, and when we passed it in Southborough, recreation was not a allowable expense. That was changed. There was an amendment made, and it can be spent out of the general reserve funds down here, but it doesn't have its own bucket. All right. So after we have all that set aside, we're left with 332,508. Everyone good there?
Yep.
All right. So I have a new, I have to move you guys because I can't. Sorry, you don't know that I'm moving you. Can you see that I'm moving you?
No.
Oh,
Can't
the
see
Zoom
that.
screen. I have to move it around so I can get to my. So this here I got from the town accountant. You can't even see it there. I worked with this. It's a little bit different. It's a new town accountant who came on after, you know, Heidi left, and I'm not 100% confident in all the numbers because I want to back them out, if that makes sense. I shouldn't say all the numbers, but the 355. So here we go. This is a long history. You don't really need to know that. That's how they put it out. But last year we had a total of, not sure why this is like this. I'm not sure what this is, so ignore that. But we had 23,061 left in the account because it was, how do I say this? There's a balance, I'll start over. There's a balance in all of the reserve accounts if we haven't zeroed them out. And we always, the CPC has always chosen to zero out the account if money for that type of expenditure is used, right? So I'll go over here to housing. We haven't spent any money out of there. So there's 359,000, a little 109 in that account, right? 46,197 in the open space account. And this is this is, I don't know what happened on that number. There was 23,061 in the historic account. But we had zeroed it out with the bell tower. If we were going to fund that, some money came out of that historic fund. So that would have been zeroed out after town meeting, but it wasn't. So the money's still there, but right now we have to account for that money coming out. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
So that would actually be zero going into this town meeting, right? And then you add the 51,155 and that comes up, that's how much is in historic to be used. So this money is from our budget. It's not actually in the account, the 51, but we can spend it, not spend it, but budget against it for projects, right? Then you have the open space would be 97, 352, and housing comes up to 410, 264. Is everyone all right with that? And again, I'm not 100% sure on all these numbers. I want to compare them to what we had on our books last year, but you know, they're professionals, so they should be pretty good. All right, so now we're coming down to the next thing. We have.
So I just want to reiterate. So those funds, right, that we'll look at cell 38D, right? So that's $51,155, which I think if you go to the budgeted sheet that you had that we looked at before, that should be the same number, right? Yep.
Is it?
Yep.
Yep.
Yay me.
So that money is the new money that we're setting aside, that we're anticipating for receipts to come in, and it is going to go into a special bucket just for historic and has to be spent on a historic project, period. Same with the open space one. It has the 551, 155 coming in, plus the 46,197 that was there before. That gets us up to the 97,352. That has to be spent on open space. And then the other one for housing, for affordable housing, they've got 410,000 because we haven't, like Freddie said, used it in a while. So that money has to be used on those specific types of projects.
And when we get to reviewing projects, it's very specific on, it's not just anything you think is historic or anything you think is open space, or it has to be specific per the legislation. And I did want to call out, we tend to call it affordable housing, but it's actually community housing. And there's a little bit of a difference there. And if you read the act and other supporting documentations, it becomes clear. A lot of people think it's the same standards as for 40B, but it's not. It's community housing. There's other uses that can be done. So anyhow, so you have these buckets, we call them buckets, they're the reservation funds. And then you come down here, right? So this here is in a format that, this is what I want to, this whole area, I want to back it out per our numbers, but you know, they're probably right. It's just a little bit different than I normally see it. So the total amount was 355,579, right? But we had the bell tower was in the Warren article against this account from last year. So that would have had a balance moving in for this year at 78,640.93. Now that money hasn't been approved. So if it doesn't get approved, it's still available, but we can't wipe out this fund and not have that money there if that is going to be approved. Does everyone understand that? Okay. So what this means is this is our general unreserved fund that had been in the $800,000 range for a long time, guys. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
500. So we're down to 78,640. Then
That's if the bell tower gets approved. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
I'm not saying, or if you, yeah.
Okay.
Is that just the bell tower or is that Colander Field too?
Nope, Clanderfield's in another little area. So this is where people get a little confused. If you go back here, see the 332,508? That can be used on any of the uses for CPA of the set asides plus recreation, correct? It goes into what we used to refer to as the general unreserved fund, but there's something about setting it aside in a designated fund, because if you don't spend it all, I shouldn't say spend it all. I'm sorry, my terminology is terrible tonight. If we don't
Allocate.
allocate it, recommend that town meeting spend it at town meeting, you lose your ability to access it until the following year, so that if there was a special town meeting in the fall, you want to designate it goes somewhere. So we put it in this other account, which is called budgeted reserve. And that just means because you're saying it's going somewhere, that then it's in that account. And if there was a fall town meeting, you could use it. Does that make sense to anyone? If it doesn't, it will someday. All it means is these two accounts are both the 78 and, well, it's 61 now, right? And I'll go back to that, are currently available for any expense. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That was at 300. That was at 300 because we didn't spend the Colander Field warrant article, which is for 238,750. So we want to make sure we allocate that. So I put it here, and now we're left with the 61, right? So if both of those articles had gone to last year's town meeting and passed, we would right now be looking at balances of 78,640 and the 61,530. Is that clear to everyone?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
140,000 combined.
Thank you, because I didn't get to finish this spreadsheet. So now I'm going back here. Now we have the 332, 508. Hopefully this will work, because I kept crashing it earlier. So I'm going to put this over here.
So 472,000 in the general unreserved.
Yeah, so that didn't work. I'll send this out to you, but did you just do it by math, Andrew?
Yeah, so I took the 140 and added to the 332. I'm just, so it gets me to 472.
Okay. So can you tell me that and I'll type it here?
I just, I mean, I rounded up to, you know,
Give me a roundabout number.
it should be 472,000.
Okay. So that's what we have to fund projects with this year, plus specific money.
In the buckets.
Yeah, maybe I'll put it over here to make it easier. Right? However, that's not really what everything you have to use, because we already bonded other projects and we have to pay those bonds this year. And normally that would be on the spreadsheet. So it's not. So I'm going to go to the, I'm going to go over to the, I'm going to try to close out of this. Stop share. Is everyone okay?
Yeah, I have a question. Hope I'm not throwing a wrench into this, because this is math and that's not my strong suit. Why are we not using some of the money from the general funding, like the 332,508, to pay off some of the bonds a little bit earlier instead of paying interest on them? why are we just letting the money sit here instead of,
Because if we do that, the way we've done it in the past is if we do that, then we don't have any money for another project.
Small projects
Yeah.
that aren't bondable. Also,
okay,
the other answer to your question, Dorianne, and we always, when it comes to whether we're going to bond or not, and when I say we, I mean you, there's always been deep discussion on future use, flexibility, and also when you have $1 million project that's in perpetuity or has a 50-year life, you want the people getting the benefit of that to be paying for it. So that's one of the reasons you bond, you spread it out over time so that somebody who's here next year gets the benefit of a trail for $38,000, but we wouldn't have had that money and ability to do it if we spent it all on the bond for the Burnett House, if that makes sense. But somebody else,
we're paying interest. So, I mean, we're doing the Burnett House. It's there. It looks, it looks great. Just don't understand why we're not just paying that off if we have money.
You can't pay them off. That's the other thing.
Okay. All right. I just didn't understand. So I just wanted it clarified. That's
all. It's sort of a decision. I mean, you could pay more on it, but you would still have that liability and can't, and let me go to the next screen. So I'm going to stop sharing now. All right. This screen. And I'm going to try to share the bonding screen. Sorry, my dog is he's not feeling well and he's fussing. I think this is it. We're going to try. Okay. Bonding. So let's go over here. This came from Brian Valentine. So we have the Burnett House bond. We have the library restoration. And there's two lines because before they bond it, they take out short-term interest and you just are paying the interest. Okay. So this 118,220, we already paid the 85 and the 19,000, but we still owe the 13,033 that came up after town meeting when we had budgeted the other interest. All right. So we owe that 13,000 plus we owe the 154 because we're obligated to pay these bonds. Does everyone understand that?
Yep.
There's a bond for the Burnett House and there's a bond for the library restoration totaling 154 plus the 13. And what was it, Andrew? Do you remember for
What?
The total we had available?
472. So I took the 472, you subtract out 51,000 from historic.
Thank
right?
you.
Because we're going to use up all the historic funds, right? 51,000, not 50.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
And then, it's 51,155. We'll use up all that.
I'll give you an accurate spreadsheet later. I'm just doing it.
So then
Quick.
it should leave us with around 300 and then we have to subtract out 101,000, which is the leftover from the bond.
So what basically you have is we owe 154. These are both, just to make it easy, they're both historic, right? The library and the Burnett House. So we're going to take the 51. What was it, Andrew? 155?
155. We'll take that. And it was
leaves us with 266
103, right? Is that correct?
right.
minus the 103.
So then you subtract the 103 from the 472. I don't know.
Does
Yeah.
that sound right? 368, 512, give or take. The 472 was a little bit off. So these are rounded numbers a little bit. So basically, any projects coming before us for this round of applications, this is how much money we have, 368,512.
Well, from the general, the 368 we have from the general, we still have in the open space 97,000.
You don't have an open space project.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying for monies in general. And then on top of that, the housing has 410.
Which doesn't have a project this year.
I know, but I'm just saying that they're
Working on it.
there's still
Yeah.
funds. It's not like we only have. I mean, there's still a lot of funds out there.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry to have, if I confused it. What I was saying is you have 368,512 for the projects in front of you this year that you have applications for. Does that make
Without
sense?
bonding.
And Freddie, that yearly bonding liability goes down every year by a little bit.
Yeah, let me go over here. So you're going to like seeing is, see it going down, down, down. The 0 is the one which was the short-term interest. Now it's going down. Okay. Now here's interesting. The townhouse, there's an estimate of the bonding amount for the townhouse. If the CPC approved it at the amount, it was, this is from town treasurer. I certainly didn't do it. And he assumed, I guess, a 3%. And I guess there's 2 components to it, the building and then the windows, and this is the total, okay? So now I'm going to come over here, bond capacity. So this is what I did. I took the original, what we owe on existing bonds, right? And then it's off. These are coming in. So basically fiscal year 22, if we add the townhouse in, there'll be some short-term interest. We don't know how much it is, but there'll be some amount, but it won't be a big bond amount. This is forecasting if you approve that and it went through, right? So this is, I took Brian's and put them to match up with the years for the Burnett House and the library. So now you have, see the yellow? That's the total amount of debt for the bonds required to pay each year. I should be up here. So do you see that? Everyone okay with that? All right. Then what happens is we have this other consideration. So the CPC, you can only bond against the surcharge. We get a state match, but you can't bond against it because we never know what it's going to be. Like in the early years, you know, we were lucky and we got 100%. But what if we bonded 20 years out for that? Oops. So now that we're at 20%, so you can bond against the surcharge. And then at one time I had gone through and taken every year and subtracted and then divided and found out that we averaged around 3.5% annual increase. To be safe, I gave it a 3% increase of taxes each year. Because we all know that taxes go up something, right? So historically, we've gone up at least 3%. So I took next year's anticipated surcharge and multiplied it out each year to go up. So like 460, 600 and 1,000 and 2037. So the surcharge would go up to pay the bond off. But what happens is when you pay the bond, you still have to put aside your set asides for the other uses of bonds, correct? You can't spend it all because you need the 5% of the surcharge for the historical, affordable, community housing and open space. And what that means is we bond at, and these would all be historical projects, correct? So the only bucket you can take out of is the historical budget. So you need to set aside 25% for the other set asides. So this is the dollar amount, what we call our bonding capacity. You can't bond on money you don't have. So we really only have the capacity for the 289. Does everyone understand that?
So that's the 75% that we're allowed to bond against of the surcharge.
And these are estimates, but so, I mean, of this, the surcharge going up, but this year,
Should that say 0.75 instead of 0.075?
yeah, it should.
So are we paying 182,667 in interest in 2023 on the bond for the townhouse? Is that what that number is representing?
What? I'm sorry?
You see what it said? Yeah, on line 10, go across, it says townhouse, and it says interest, and then in 2023.
No, that's for 2022. We're going to owe some amount of interest. I don't know
Right.
how much.
But go to the next
That's the
column.
total bond payment.
That's the whole payment. That's not just an interest payment.
Yes, I didn't know how to do
Okay.
this to let you know
Okay.
that we're going to have to pay something, but we don't know how much, right?
If you were telling me we're paying 182,000 in an interest, I would go back and say, pay off the bond, because that's crazy.
All right, Dorianne, you got it? No interest.
I got it.
We're going to have to pay something if you approve this at town meeting. There will be some amount of short-term interest. As you see up here, there was, for the library, there was a total of 19 and 13,000. I believe that was interest. Okay. So then what happens is if you come down here, this year we're okay because we're not making any payments on the townhouse bond. But in this year, fiscal year 2023, you're short 35,195 in bonding capacity to cover your bond. Does it mean you can't do it by spending more money up front from the general unreserved and bond less? You can, pay. You could pay $200,000 and only bond, and then have the bond payments be less for the townhouse.
But you can
You'd
also,
have to work it out.
but wouldn't that also, if we,
I'm sorry.
that's the bonding capacity, we're short 35,000. But if we took from the historic bucket, which this year is going to be 151,000, we could still cover it, right?
No,
No, okay.
because you're already assuming 5%. Oh, wait a minute.
I don't think so.
You're already assuming the 5%. I mean, the 10%.
Where?
Because the bonding capacity is 75%.
Oh,
So if you take the 10% is included in that. Not necessarily for this year, but
So shouldn't we take the money from the general fund to pay that down to start?
these are all decisions you have to make. Going back to the, you have 400 and, what was it? 400 and
10?
No, it'd be 369 is what we're left with.
472 is what you said?
Yeah, 472.
So I thought you can't, so just to be clear, you can't pay the 35 out of that. You have to lower the bond, I would think.
Right, but
We
we,
ran into this before. We tried to pay off a bond so we could use bonding capacity, and it doesn't work that way. You'd want to pay it up front to lower the bond amount by 35,000 in that first year. And I don't know how many tens of thousands that would take.
But I mean, the other thing to be clear, so if we did do this, then it means basically for the next 2 years, we'd have no leftover money to do any other projects, right? Besides the projects before us. And then, you know, we'd slowly start building up the first year, what Freddie has highlighted there. It would take a while to start building up a pool of cash to fund projects going forward, other than open space would still have some the set asides that would go in every year, and so would house it.
And actually, this here is just bonding capacity. This isn't money. This isn't funds. I can run that differently also, because here you'd have to take the bonds. Anyhow, I can run that also. But
Freddie, when you update all these, could you send those out to us so we can take a look at them again?
yeah,
Thank you.
So, and to give some background too, when we did Chestnut Hill Farm, there was the, you know, we were getting a lot of pressure to actually fund the whole thing. But on the CPC, we pushed back, said, look, you know, well, we don't want to be a committee that's only funding one thing for the town. That's not what the CPC is set up for across the board. And then, you know, it became a partnership, I guess, with the town later, where we did most of it, but we didn't do the whole thing, so that we weren't completely tapped out.
yeah, we don't need to.
Fund.
Also, I'm sorry, I've got you guys over this again. So this here is just the bonding capacity. I'll run one with like how much money you'd have to take. You know, the excess money from this to the, maybe this is what this is. Sorry, my head's fried. I had something happen today. So, yeah. So we'd have, you're right. This is $39,000 in 2027, plus whatever is in
The buckets.
and the state surcharge.
Right.
But you're not doing any significant projects for,
State match.
what did I say? Sorry.
State surcharge.
Yeah, the state match.
So, you know, my gut feeling next year state match gonna be kind of tight with COVID and everything. But you know, who knows? And we've been conservative in the past and how we look at this. But the only money we can truly count on is the surcharge to the town residents, because there is, you know, fluctuation. When we first started out with this on the CPC, we were getting 100% match for what the town was putting into it, which was great. We saw that for 3-4 years, I think, and then it slowly, you know, started dipping down. It was 75, 68, and now, you know, we're in the 20. I think we were 38 one time.
And I can send out, we usually have this, the Community Preservation Coalition has that. We always present that at our annual forum that we didn't have this year because of COVID.
And the reason for the decline in the match is because of more, a couple things that go into it. One is the way the state gets revenue across it, or helps fund this. In the past had to do a lot of excise tax when people bought new cars and everything, or mortgages, right?
I think it's a flat rate on every deed. So it's like, it used to be $20 and they've gone up to maybe 50, I'm not sure. But when the real estate market is booming, you get a lot more deeds, you know, transactions happening or people refinancing. And we were one of the first communities that adopted, so there weren't that many towns in the Commonwealth that were drawing out of. So the trust fund was booming and there weren't that many towns withdrawing. So we were lucky. We it's not that we aren't getting as much as we deserve. It's just that we were an early adopter and got the benefit of that.
And now there are a lot more towns that are actually partaking in the CPC and drawing down on that compared to the fewer towns that were the original trailblazers with adopting the CPC early on. So that's part of the reason how the match has decreased so much. So
We just to say, we pay dues to the Community Preservation Coalition, and they actually helped lobby and got this bump in the surcharge, or else we'd be even lower than the. That's why we got the extra 50,000 last year. That went into effect. So.
But Dorian, were you saying something? I didn't hear it. You're on mute. You're on mute, Dorian.
Sorry. The original agreement when we voted on accepting the CPC was the state promised to match 100%. That's why I think we all did it. So the fact that they're not anymore.
Actually, absolutely not. I was on the committee that campaigned to get it. We were always promised our share of the trust fund that is divvied up amongst all the communities that adopt it. We were always promised our fair share. We went over this numerous times, and there was, you know, that we got 100% was great. There was never a guarantee. We were always guaranteed to get 100% of our fair share. That was it. Always. I can, you know, dig out those early days of PR. We did PowerPoints, we did presentation, town meeting. We had lots of public forums, but it was never, people liked the 100% and then thought that's what we were told we were getting, but it was never, nobody would lie to you, the public. The state didn't, we didn't. So.
All right.
So I was just gonna ask a quick question, Andrew.
Sorry.
So just to clarify, so like I follow along with like all the math that we're going on here, but I have just a clarification on the bonding here. So does this mean when we are looking at this application for the townhouse that's like 2 million, that would clearly have to be bonded somehow, that we do not have the bonding capacity to do that?
So what it shows, right, in line 17 is in the
Yep.
first 2 years, yeah, we'd be in the negative, so we wouldn't be able to bond at the full.
Okay.
But what Freddie's saying is, if we did want to go do it, we could do, say, take some of the 369 that's left over, apply it, you know, early on to get the bond down so that we could actually do it. But again, if we're doing it at the max, we can actually bond, and we couldn't bond any other projects that come forth until, you know, 2025, right? Or, you know, it would be a really small amount going forward. And the only thing we'd have left would be whatever the match is from the state and the set asides that we do to the other buckets.
Okay.
Makes sense? So it'd be really thin for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more like probably 6 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Until we got, you know, up over 100,000 again. So, Freddie, is that? I mean, I think that's a great overview and detail. I'd say overview for the new members and detail for the existing members and the new members on what we've got. Are there other questions? I don't want to just breeze through this, but I know it gets dizzying and it takes a couple of times to go through it.
I just want to say thank you so much for, you know, presenting this, you know, as a new member. It definitely gives me a good understanding of, you know, how our business works here. And that's just super helpful to see this level of detail.
And just so everyone knows that's new too, when we first started doing this, Freddie personally did the accounting and went to the townhouse a number of times and questioned how the town was doing this because they were off by a penny. So in some cases, so Freddie was able to, you know, match it all up and do her accounting to the point that it was very exact. So thank you, Freddie.
Welcome.
And that drove her crazy. And then we ended up getting our own accountant for a while. And we got all straightened out. And then once we were on solid ground, we were like, all right, we don't need the accountant anymore. And that's what we use the admin funds for. So.
And in the early years, just to be clear, it was new. Nobody knew how to set up these accounts, and we went to take money to not take money, but to fund a project, and an account hadn't even been set up yet. And if I didn't have spreadsheets, you know, to say this is supposed to have this amount of money in it, but I never went after the town for a penny. I just was like, well, this is off a penny, so I didn't really go after them for a penny. But I'm going to mute this. I'm sorry for the barking dog.
All right.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
No, that's great. Thank you, Freddie. Well, that's the budget piece.
That was the quick version.
Yeah. And like Freddie said, she's got some tweaking to do, so we'll get some additional numbers and clarify the bonding capability and what we'd have to adjust or pay forward ahead of time for the townhouse, so that we weren't in the hole, and what it would look like. And then Freddie, if you can do it, say if we did, say we bonded, you know, say if we did the whole project, or if we only funded, say, 75% of it, or even 50%, so we had a gauge of what it would look like with our funds afterwards. Does that make sense? I can talk to you afterwards, but I think that would be helpful for me to know, all right, if we only did 75% of the townhouse and the town would have to pick up the rest, what does that dollar amount look like for the town? And how much would we be, say, tied to for 20 years or whatever? So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Ready?
Yes, if you tell me, because I'm not going to ask the town treasurer to run the numbers without someone else telling me that's what they want to have done.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going up to the townhouse and say you don't want to fund it all, because I just want to know, right?
I think we should be fully educated. For me, I would like to see, all right, if we did 100% of it, what would we have to spend up front, and then we could bond. But what if we only bonded, say, 75% of it, or if we only did 50% of it? How much would that leave for the town to actually have to pay, and what would that leave us for future projects? And we wouldn't have like 6 years so that we couldn't do anything. That's for me personally. I'd like to see that, and I think that would be helpful for the whole committee to make an informed decision on what we want to do.
Andrew, I agree. And in the same vein, I mean, I look at that project and I see a lot of maintenance that's being characterized as historic preservation. And, we went through a pretty painstaking process on the Burnett House to try to distinguish what's truly historic preservation versus maintenance. Has there been any effort to do that here? I think it's particularly important where, if we didn't decide to fund any of this, it would still be funded. The town would find a way to restore it. Apparently, the decision's been made that the municipal operation of this town will continue out of the townhouse. I have my own feelings about that, but is anyone else troubled by what maintenance that seems to be masquerading as restoration?
I am also, Mark, and also it happens with a lot of it seems historical preservation projects, but we're not only taking care of some maintenance issues, we're being asked to fund some things I don't think are historical. I think they had membrane roofs back in colonial days, for instance. But also we're dealing with the consequences of deferred maintenance. And I'm just concerned that I don't want us to be seen as this reservoir for taking care of the can that's been kicked down the road for 20 years and no longer have the ability to fund the things that we are actually set up to fund.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are talking about restoring windows so you can crack them open to get a breeze in that building. I think that's crazy, but you know, I don't mean to get into this discussion now, but some effort has to be made to really.
We're having them back, correct, to have an in-depth discussion on, I've got a page full of notes that I jotted down in our last meeting that I just to make sure that I get to them when they're back, when we have time to really delve into it, but I share your concerns.
Yeah, yes, we are having them back, and we're kind of
Okay.
transitioning into the next piece anyhow, which was, you know, the internal application overview for the March 2021 or 20th, 2021 meeting. So, you know,
Can I jump in on historically, if we had funded things that the CPC had been pressured to in the past, half of the projects that have been, and it would be nice for you guys to see the full list of the new members of all the projects that have been funded by this, and some are small and some are large, but a lot of them wouldn't have been done if we had funded everything that had been put in front of the commission. However, if you so decided, like, you know, you can get advice on which of these things are historic or, you know, because which qualify and which don't. You may want to seek some advice for that. And that is also, there should be some free advice on that, but it's also the type of thing you can fund a consultant out of the admin money if you so if it got to that level, but you can also look at it and pick and choose yourself. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I found some pretty detailed resources online on like what communitypreservation.org about like what is or what isn't allowed to be funded. So like I found that helpful when I was reading through that. I guess I have one kind of like fundamental question though, is our role to decide whether or not these applications qualify, and if they qualify, we have to pass them forward to town floor, or we get to make a judgment call on whether or not we want to pass them forward.
so in the past, it's been, I'd say the first piece is, hey, is this a viable project that the CPC can fund? We had one request from the fire department in the past that they wanted to say for, I think it was under recreation, they wanted us to buy them an ATV vehicle so they could run through the woods and, you know, save people and go on the trails and things. And we leveraged the Community Preservation Coalition in Boston. Oh, and the one thing that they were doing was the Southborough Fire Department was referencing that Northborough did this already with their CPC funds, and why won't we do it? And when I called the coalition, they was like, no, they should have never done that. There was a lot of early on, people were kind of, there were some projects that got approved that shouldn't have, and the coalition has been great at steering us to stay in the best path for the use of the funds. So that was, you know, that never made it to town meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
There have been others that, like a house that was taken down that was deemed historic, that used to be on the corner of Center Street and Route 9, where the applicant wanted us to help restore the building and the windows and everything. And, you know, it was reviewed by the historic commission, and they decided, well, since the house was actually taken down and moved, it's no longer historic anymore. That never made it to town meeting. Now, there are others too where, you know, we can, yes, we make a decision whether or not to move it forward to town meeting or not, recommend it to town meeting. We don't approve the funds. We're saying, hey, this meets all the guidelines. We think it aligns. This is one thing that we ask for all the different committees and groups out there, like historic and recreation. You know, what's your plan? Where's this fall? You know, in case from a recreation standpoint, say if someone like wanted to come up and say, hey, we need paddle courts. Let's put paddle courts over near Neary and, we can do a fall activity and, here's, I need $30,000 to do that. Just some random, I did that, right? Came forth and asked the CPC. Well, we'd say, well, where does it fall in the recreationals plan? Might not even be on there. Be like, well, we don't want to do that. And then in that case, we'd be like, look, you really need to work with the recreation to make sure that it aligns with their plan. And now, maybe, if recreation came in like, yeah, we think it's a great idea, we'd like to do it. But they're like, now we have other ideas that we want to use the funds for, CPC funds for, we do this. And same with historic. There was another individual in town who wanted us to redo their windows in their home. And, we went to the historic commission and asked them like, hey, what's this file? And they're like, yeah, no. I'm like, oh, well, you don't have any support from that aspect. It's not happening. So that's where it's fallen in the past. We have had, I think even last year, the Burnett House, Mr. Piscoli there was looking for us to fund a little park right in front of his house. But it was never a park before. It wasn't on recreation's list. It wasn't, he wanted to put a historic clock right out there and us to pay for it and a bench and all this other stuff. Like, it was never there before. We're not here. We can't create history. So that was quietly never taken off the list.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think, but in the bell tower situation, like Ben said, for the church, there was a significant piece, and I'm going off what I'm trying to repeat what Ben said earlier, that it was decided that, hey, we want to let the town decide. Aldo said, yeah, it is a legitimate use we could spend funds on. And even some of the committee members aren't necessarily in favor of it, but they said the town should decide what should happen. So, and how that gets presented on town meeting, if it makes it there, see what happens. So, and it is a recommendation from this committee to say, yeah, it meets all the qualifications for it. It's in the plans for, say historic or open space or recreation, housing, or whoever, and that, and even in the master plan for the town, how's it fit into that? That's another piece that we can leverage. And the coalition in Boston, if it's been done in other towns, and we run all the projects by them as well to say, hey, are we going way off base on this, or where do we stand? So,
Can I jump in for a second?
Yep.
Just to clarify, you don't run all your projects by them, just if you have a question. Yeah, because you have autonomy to the committee to use your best judgment. So it's not like they're not a gatekeeper. And I would just say that, I mean, like, you can run everything by them if you want, but they're not a gatekeeper, but we pay dues to them because they are the experts.
Right. I've used them as a sounding board, say, hey, am I off base? They don't look at the whole plan, but like, this is what we're talking about. Like in the case of the ATV vehicle for the fire department, they're like, absolutely not. You should not be doing that. So,
another way to look at it is the money set aside pursuant to the Community Preservation Act is not funds that are an alternative source of revenue to operate a municipality. That's not the intent, and that's not what they're there for. And so that's kind of a lens to look at it, especially a big project like what's being proposed from the townhouse, in my view anyway.
I think we're coming to the end of a period where we've been kind of spoiled. I think the year that I came on the committee, we sent in the last payment on Chestnut Hill Farm, and that opened up a bunch of bonding capacity and freed up a lot of the budget. And to answer part of your question, Jennifer, just about everything, every project that came in that met the standards of the Community Preservation Act, just about everyone, we were able to forward to town meeting because the funding capacity was there. But with something like this, for instance, the townhouse project, we will be precluding opportunities a long way into the future. And we finally, sort of the honeymoon here is over. We have to, take into account what can be coming down the road in the future, what opportunities are going to cost ourselves if we take this on. It's a position we haven't been in since I've been on the committee anyway, in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well put.
And and I know Freddie's talked about this in the past, and we've struggled with the other committees and boards to give us their plans. But like, say, I think like Nantucket, right? They have everything budgeted out what they're going to do for the CPC funds for the next like 10 years, right? Everything, right? So there's not, they've got everything lined up. They've got it all,
I've tried.
Yeah, we've tried, but that would be, that would alleviate a lot of the pressure of the situation we're in right now. If we could say, hey, yeah, we'd love to fund the entire piece of the townhouse, but we can't, because if you do that, then we're not going to be able to do, the paddle courts for recreation that they want to do in 4 years or whatever, right? Historic preservation of another cemetery that's completely falling apart and we have to straighten all the headstones, or create a park somewhere, all that stuff. It becomes a lot easier to the town to say, yeah, if you want to go ahead and do this, you can, but you're going to give up all this other piece that everyone already has planned for the funds. So,
I think we have to take each project as they come to us and present it to us and weigh the benefits of that project and not worry about the future ones. We should be taking them each project at a time. And we may not want to fund the whole thing, but I don't think we should be funding or not funding projects based on what possibly could be happening in the future. Should we use all the funds? No, I don't think we should, but I think we should be weighing the importance of each of the projects that is actually brought in front of us at the time it's brought in front of us.
And
That's just what I think, but.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yep.
And I agree with Dorianne that you need to weigh each project, but you're also required by the legislation to be looking at having a plan for future needs and not just what's here today. And when we had more money, it wasn't as when you had more money, it wasn't as critical, but that might be something you want to relook at again.
So with that said, back to the applications that are actually still before us. So at the next meeting, I think, the last one was kind of rushed, so we can get through and do the placeholders. So we're going to do placeholders for the 3 of them. I think at the next meeting, we want to actually go through and have them back so we can have a more detailed discussion. I think that's the 17th.
Andrew, could we also get copies of the warrant articles that didn't make it to town meeting that we're supporting, or not supporting, but we are putting forward, and get those at the next meeting as well so we can review them, especially with the new members, they've never seen them.
Yeah, I think we already discussed that.
Okay.
You get those, you can get those out, Betsy? Okay.
Can you access them on the website?
That's a project we were going to be working on before COVID,
Okay.
but it's on our to-do list to get them all on there. This year's will get up there. We'll start from here.
Thanks.
So we get the copies of the warrant articles from last town meeting that didn't make it. I'll put that kind of at the end of the meeting agenda for the next time, so we can get through the current applicants first. So
Can I just suggest one other thing when you're reviewing the applications to see what you want to ask the applicants, jot down what you might think of as items for the MOU at the same time.
Like we discussed earlier, Jen, if you send that the MOU out to everyone, and Mark, if you can have an updated draft for us, that'd be great, based on what recreation is already used. So for the placeholders that have to be in by the 11th, Freddie or Betsy, do you either of you know how detailed they have to be? Is it just like, hey, put a placeholder in for these 3 projects?
I did it with Mark every year. It's just what the project is. Actually, last year, I think it was how many. It's, like one for historical, one for, it's the budget. It was just almost very vague.
Okay. No
detail.
So put those in. We'll discuss on the 17th in more detail with the applicants. Everyone have their notes based off the review of the applications that you have, or we can discuss if they're so since it is a bullet item, we can discuss for the applications now if there's anything specific people want to talk about to line things up so we're not stumbling over each other when the applicants actually come in. We can do that now. To line up our questions for them. I don't want any applicant who's not sitting, in the waiting room or anything to feel that we're, making decisions without them here. But if there are things for us to coordinate in terms of making the meeting more fluid when they actually come, I think that would be appropriate.
Could I just a couple of quick ones? Someone mentioned previously that I think it was you, Mark, that we spent a lot of time going through at 84 Main what was and wasn't fundable as historic preservation. Got a couple of questions about the townhouse. I don't know if these are questions we should be asking the coalition prior to our next meeting, just to streamline things once we're all sitting in our Zoom session. But there are a couple of things, a door that was built in 1990 that was not a historic replica, as well as a membrane roof, are 2 items that I'm concerned don't fall under the heading of historic preservation.
Replacing downspouts, I think, fall in that category too.
Yeah, I'm not sure when those were added exactly to the building, but yeah, and then there's some question with the windows also. I know Mass Historical has sort of extensive guidance on the historical preservation of windows, and I'm not sure if it even allows the replacement of single pane glass with double pane glass, for instance. So I guess I would welcome input even from Freddie right now, who knows an awful lot about this stuff. Freddie, is this something worth contacting the coalition prior to our next meeting to try to get some advice on?
So, well, yes and no. Yes, if you want to know the answer. So how it goes is the committee can use their best judgment. And if you have a concern about something, if they tell you, no, it's not an allowable funded project, then you really can't with a straight face later say, well, we want to fund it. So we always were very clear on what we wanted to ask to get that answer. So yes, and I think there's some, I don't want to call it wiggle room, but in my experience, there was some like if something keeps a building from deteriorating further,
Okay,
like
roof.
downspouts,
or the roof,
right?
yeah.
Or a roof that needs to be fixed, it could be, but it doesn't require that you choose to do so, if that makes
Okay.
sense. But you would really want more specific expert advice on it. And, you know, like you said, you have the authority to say, we feel this is what the historical dollar should go towards. Or to say, this is what we think the CPA dollar should go for, because there's other projects that may come up, or that we know are coming up, and certainly any maintenance items. You asked me last time, can I talk about this, Andrew?
Yep.
To specifically ask the coalition if painting was a allowable CPA use. And the answer is no, except for if you took out and replaced all the wood, say there was rotted wood and you had to repair it, then you would need to probably paint it to keep that from, if that makes sense to you, like, but you
Like a
can't.
wooden window, right? If you had to
What?
take, if a wooden window, you had to take it out to reglaze it, strip it down, place some wood on it and everything, put it back together and paint it. You could do that.
But
paint the
Department of Revenue, which is really, because this is a surcharge on, it's a tax, right? We call it, it's a surcharge on taxes. It is a tax. It falls under the Department of Revenue, who has the big oversight of it. And they issue guidance papers once in a while, not often. And I guess painting was one of the ones they've issued a paper on. And if you need to see it, I can have them. Stuart said he could dig it up for us.
If painting is not allowed, then it strikes me that pointing.
Yeah, the repointing a brick is, I'm not ready to
Yeah.
hold my hand at that. That's classic maintenance.
You're gonna have to pay for it one way or another. So you're either gonna put it in the CPC funds or you're gonna pay for it in your taxes. But the building is, all this work just seems like, after reading through it, pointing the brick, paint, whatever we have to do, if we're gonna pay for it one way or another. So you're gonna raise your taxes to do it, or you're gonna use your CPC funds that you've surtaxed the taxpayers on it. It's their money. So
and I think
I don't know what the answer is, but
I think another way is if we start using CPC funds, we can help direct how it has to be done, right? So it has to be limestone that gets replaced, or you can't just file down the limestone. You got to replace it, not just make it look pretty. I think that's where we could help. The townhouse might get restored no matter what, even if we don't give any money from the CPC. But if we from the CPC get involved, we might be able to dictate, you have to keep the windows, and they have to be, you can't throw replacement windows in there, right? And you have to restore it in a historic way. Maybe the door, right? It'd be terrible if they take that door and they put some vinyl thing in, right? That would ruin the whole front of the building. But that could really happen if we're not involved, right? So I think this is where we talk about a little bit of the wiggle room in terms of what we can and can't do. If, I agree that the door, if it's not, technically historic, but I'm comfortable if it's going to keep a look and a feel to that building that is historic, instead of the, say someone just putting a big vinyl door in there, because that would ruin the building. And I think if they put replacement windows throughout it, I think that would ruin it too. The windows are the eyes to the soul of a building. They are.
I love those windows. I think they're great.
Yeah. And I know we'll get a lot of pushback, because when we did the windows down at South Union School, people have complained that the new storm that's on the inside, it's so heavy, and blah, 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 and all this other stuff, but that was a condition that they had to be replaced. They could, not replaced, they had to be they had to be refurbished and repaired and put back. They couldn't just replace it. So, I mean, I think that's one thing you have to think about with the townhouse, because if we just step away, who knows what they're going to do? They could take white caulking and just fill in all those cracks. Be like, all right, the bricks are repointed.
Well, Andrew, I have to say that we stepped away from this. They might actually someone might actually say, wow, $2.2 million expenditure in a pandemic. Let's rent some of the 1 million square feet of commercial office space available in this town and like bring the town into the 21st century. I personally think the entire project is crazy, and I love the building. Rent some space. Don't spend $2.2 million putting lipstick on this pig that hasn't been maintained for the last 80 years. But if someone made the decision, well, we might grow out of this building in a couple of years. Is it really a smart expenditure of money? I don't think anyone's going that far. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
I would assume the capital budget
may actually be driving the decision to spend $2.2 million on this building. And I think that's crazy, but that's me. And I love history. I love the building, but I just think it's crazy.
Mark, how do you really feel?
So
good, I'm glad somebody else is getting fired up in this meeting tonight beside me. And my maiden name is Murphy, so there's two peas in a pod here.
So I think back to the original question, and I'm not trying to discount what you're saying or anything, Mark. I respect your opinion, and from a finance point, yeah, there are a lot of empty buildings around. So yeah, you could easily
Municipal workers who are sitting in that building with no ventilation during a freaking pandemic. It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
So I want to get back to the question about the repointing, the roof, the door, and things like that. I mean, when you look at what we just spent for the library, there's a lot of repointing going on there. There's a roof that's going on there. So I think our question is answered, at least on those two pieces. Yes, it is allowed. They're redoing some of the sandstone on the library as well. So I know that wasn't one of the things. I mean, the windows definitely, from my personal opinion, would be I'd want a condition that we refurbish the windows that are there, not replace them. If we move forward with the townhouse. So the big question would be the door, from the aspect of not being historic. And I don't know if, what I just said about, if we didn't do that and it wasn't then in a historic likeness for the building, that would ruin the building. So I don't know how much we want to.
Well, it was historic, Andrew, according to John, it was historic when it was a solid wooden door and they showed what it looked like. And then to bring more light into the building, when they did the addition or something on the front of it, they made it glass so they would brighten up the room. But as far as historic is concerned, it has to be replaced as a solid wooden door. So I don't know. Do you want to make it dark in there, or do you want it to be light?
Yeah,
I think that's the difference with the door. So I don't know.
yeah. So we can ask Stuart on clarification on the door, because it looks like the frame of it is still in keeping of the original shape. It was just taking out some of the panels so that allowed the light in. So I mean, in that respect, I think they tried to keep the original intent of the original door there, with allowing the light to get in. So, but I'm not an expert on this. I'm just saying from my.
May I jump in on this topic? I recall from one of the other projects that if there's been a replacement door, right? Historic preservation is you're preserving what's left of the historic building. You don't go and add an old door that's like what was there before necessarily, because you're not, it's a little bit tricky, but you're not recreating the history that was there. You're preserving what's left, if that makes sense. There's ways of looking at it differently, but just because something's been replaced doesn't mean if it's part of the project, it's overall historical. You don't have to go back and get, you know, if it's a 1700 house, right? You don't have to get a 1700 door that wasn't the door that came with the house. You just can't take off the 1700 door and throw it away and put, you know, a new door there. But
Was
there's
that
lots
when
of,
we ran into that with the South Union School?
maybe. And I'd also say with the South Union School windows, I think since we did that, there might be other or better ways of having the windows done.
Yeah.
I could be mistaken, but I think I've heard that if you were to do it today, you wouldn't have some of the issues they have with those storm windows.
Okay. So I think we ran the course on the townhouse. How about the other two projects? Or are there more questions on the townhouse?
Yeah, can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
At our last meeting, you mentioned that historic needs to take another vote on this. And I just wanted to tell you guys that we're meeting, we have a meeting next Tuesday, the 9th, and I'll make sure that that's on the agenda. But I just wanted to clarify that we just have to vote that we support the project as proposed, or was there anything more specific that we needed to cover?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, Ann. The two votes have to be, first, a finding that the building is of historical significance, and then the second vote has to be that the project as proposed is supported by the Historical Commission. And Freddie has the exact language of those two votes. And then I expressed some concern last time that one of the vote that Historical supported the project had a contingency in it that the windows be given to the Historical Society, I believe, for use in the future. Yeah, so now with what Andrew has said, if we were to go forward and recommend this to town meeting, we would likely be requiring that the windows remain with the building. And I think having that contingency in there might be a problem.
Okay.
And in any event, if the windows are going to be replaced for whatever reason, that's something that we would be able to cover within a memorandum of understanding, rather than have it be in the decision, which I think for a couple of reasons might be problematic, just having it in there. So if, I guess I would recommend maybe reconducting that vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Exclude that contingency.
yeah, well, if it was specific on what should happen with the windows from a historic committee standpoint, I think would be helpful in general. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on historic protection, but for me personally, like I said, the windows are the eyes to the soul of the building. So
Okay.
if you rip those out and put replacement ones in.
Okay. Yeah. So that discussion and that vote happened before I was on Historical. I'm new to that committee as well, so I don't have the background there, but I can ask at the meeting if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we also need to take any votes on the second project for Historical that was proposed? I don't believe we've talked about that at all with our committee.
With the flag museum?
Yeah, the Historical Society building.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, I think we know that the building's historic. The question is if it's supported.
Or if they did discuss it, it was before my time.
Yeah.
And they haven't posted minutes since April, so I'll do some digging on that.
Thank you.
The historic building, we were also going to look into seeing what we'd done previously, right? To make sure that we all understood what previously had funded, to be able to compare to what they're asking us to do now, because there's some concern that we might be repeating.
Well, I think, yeah, they asked about the paint, but what Freddie just said about painting is not allowed unless you're gonna strip the boards off and restore the boards themselves, which I don't think that is gonna happen.
We
So-
can get the old application to see what was funded. And
Yeah, that would be helpful, even just for context there. I know I was poking around on the website a little bit, but I couldn't find everything. So
So Andrew, could we say that when we bring the warrant articles forward, could we say we're not covering this or this or this part of the project, only this part? Like, would we be very specific in the warrant article, or how would we handle that? We don't just say the whole project, yes or no. Could we be very specific?
No, in the budgeting of where they have the breakdown for the cost.
Yeah.
You just like line item it out, say, okay, we can't cover this. You know, we could do windows on the building.
Okay.
We can't, or the painting's out. So then.
So we would say no painting. We would put it in there in the warrant article?
No, we just say it's specific for the windows and, you know, to restore the windows and, you know, since the painting's out, I think. we just-
Okay.
And, but then, you know, then it's, and for me, this is where it gets tough and where we talked about it before with some buildings. If we're just doing windows, is that really historic restoration of the building? No, that's just, then we're really getting into maintenance, right? We're doing one thing. We're not doing the facade. We're not, you know, the roof and stopping, you know, the drain problems and repointing and everything. I mean, that's a project where we're doing a restoration of the building. If we're just doing windows, is that maintenance?
there's maintenance.
What? Freddie, you cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. And my dog too. He's not well, so bear with it.
He only likes to bark when you talk.
We noticed that.
Did you? As soon as I get off here, he'll lie down and be good. But he really isn't well. And I can't think, I'm sorry. I would say you don't have to do a whole building to do a historic preservation restoration project, but you want to look at what you're actually, you know, I guess I'm just pointing out to each project is different, and there could be a time when it is just the windows that needed to be restored historically, right? But it's not necessarily, that's more likely to be pulling all the windows out and redoing the rotting frames than something that's maintenance.
So, I mean, but if we could get and from a perspective from the Historic Commission on the flag school, that'd be great. Recommendation. Any other discussions on the flag school? How about the trails? Anything?
Did anybody go on that walk on Saturday?
I was
I did.
not able to do it. I was with my family getting my Christmas tree.
It's a, you know, I think it's a worthwhile project. It bugs the hell out of me that DCR takes the position it does, but I suppose their view is it's not open to the public right now, so we really don't have to worry about much. But if we're willing to open it up to the public, then there's this concrete structure that could be problematic. So why don't you fund the fence? And
So my beef with that is it's a concrete structure that's problematic, but they're allowing hunters to go in there now. That go in the dark, because that's when you go in to hunt. You go in the dark, so the deer aren't moving, and set up. If anyone's gonna get hurt, that's when it's gonna be, or they come out in the dark. So like, it's crazy that they're requiring that of us. But I think that another point too, doing a little bit more research, it sounds like there needs to be a plan to actually open that up. So we might have an opportunity to put in the MOU or a condition to say, look, yeah, we can, maybe we'll fund it if, one, you look for grants first, you exhaust all grant opportunities before that happens. And two, that there's an actual accessibility plan that DCR provides, which is, I think, required. So that for the Trails Committee to even apply for grants. So get those two things first before they start using any funds that we might allocate. Does that make sense?
I think it's a good idea.
But
Ask council if we put a fence up around an attractive nuisance that's a danger, are we setting the town up for a liability if somebody actually gets hurt on that? Because we know it's there. We've opened it up. We're allowing them to go in. We've put the fence there. So if some little kid climbs on it and falls inside and breaks his head open, are we liable because we put the fence around the attractive nuisance? I think that we need to get Aldo to weigh in on this.
We're not opening up anything to anyone. It's the owner.
well, Aldo reviews all the projects anyhow.
Right, but we're fencing something in that we know is an attractive nuisance. We know it's dangerous, and we're putting a fence up as a town. That might open us up to liability if someone actually gets hurt on it versus the people who the DSR or DVR, whatever they are. Let them deal with it. It's their property. It's their attractive nuisance. It's their liability. Why are the taxpayers of Southborough going to have to pay for that? Is every other town going to pay for something on there, or is it just Southborough?
Oh, no,
My only point was Aldo reviews all the warrant articles, so he's going to review that anyhow and make a recommendation if we move it to that point. Are you saying you want to have that decision before we even if we were to move it to town meeting floor?
I think that we should know before we vote on that, whether we're setting the town up for a problem down the road. If we're going to spend taxpayers' money to protect somebody else's property that has an attractive nuisance on it. The liability isn't going to be ours, but it could be if we put the fence up. I think that we should get legal opinion on that before we vote on that. I think we should have all the information possible available to us before we vote on something like that. I'm not against the trails thing. I mean, I think it's great, but I have a problem with paying taxpayers' money for fencing on someone else's property.
So I guess how is this different than 9/11 Field where there's stands?
That's what I was just wondering, because we
and they could
run games on it and
soccer goal and
It's very different. It's not dangerous. We're talking about something that's literally dangerous. Some little kid climbs the fence and falls. There's jagged metal in there. There's cement stairs. The kid could die if they fall on the jagged metal in there. It's very different than a field. That's not even the same thing. I just think Aldo should weigh in. That's all. I would like to have Aldo weigh in on it.
Okay.
A recreation field is a very different thing than what we're talking about.
As everyone else.
My opinion.
I think Aldo's going to review them anyhow, and he's going to tell us and tell the town if there's a problem with it when it gets to the actual warrant article. And with, I agree, the structure might be different, but I think the risk. I mean, when I was growing up in school, a kid took another kid and flung him on a lacrosse net, flipped him up in the air, and the kid came down and split his head open on the lacrosse net. So I think you say it's very different, but someone could do the same thing at any of the fields like 9/11 field and kill someone. And the liability is on us because it's our lacrosse nets on someone else's property. So I think it's the same. So that's me. Others?
Well, I disagree with you.
I know.
It's a question of whether or not we're going to get a legal opinion or when we get that legal opinion.
Well, my point is, I think we're going to get an opinion
Mhm.
if it goes all the way onto the warrant article. The question is, do we go out to Aldo first to say, should this be an issue? And is that going to change everyone's mind whether or not we want to present this to town meeting or not?
I'm okay with waiting until it's on a warrant article.
Then,
I'm also okay with waiting. We will get the legal opinion. We'll get it in time to take corrective action if we have to. So I'm okay with that.
Mark
I feel the same way.
and
I'm with Dorianne. I would be most comfortable having an opinion up front before we vote to move it forward any further.
David.
I also agree it would be helpful to get that legal opinion beforehand so that we have a clear understanding of what we're reviewing, what we're voting on.
All right. So it's 4-3, but let's ask ahead of time since I like to. There's no harm. You can see what he says.
Good call.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Anything else on that one? Nope. Okay. So
One other thing, we had a question about the signage. Was that also an issue of what happens to the signage? Is it something that we own? If it gets taken away, do we lose that investment, or was that an issue that we were not really concerned about?
no, I think it's a good question to still ask the applicant. Like if the sign blows away in a windstorm, who has to replace it? Or
Right.
steals it because it's pretty and the college kid wants it in his dorm room.
Right.
Who's
That never happens.
Oh, never.
Looking like the
So,
parent. of the
Well,
con-
I think it's very fair to say, okay, we're going to put this up once, but then, ongoing, is it, TCR going to replace it, or, who, and does it have to be in a format that they have consistent? Does it have to look like, when you go in the White Mountains and all those wood signs that are, carved out with the yellow lettering and they're brown? Does it have to be something like that, or can we put up what we want if we go to Signorama? Not that we do that, but
Sure.
what the requirements are. So, and I think that'll come. You'll see that'll be part of the discussion when we talk to the applicant. Okay. Anything else?
I just wanted to mention on a prior comment that the reason you hear my dog barking when I'm talking is because I mute it when I'm not talking.
I know. I was only kidding, Freddie.
Oh, I thought you were serious.
I was only kidding.
They don't call me super sensitive for nothing.
I thought you got my sarcasm with that. All right. So let's see the next one. So the warrant articles, they're supposed to be due January 10th of 2021. And when Freddie and I were discussing this earlier, it didn't make a lot of sense because the selectmen aren't actually reviewing the budgets until a date after that. So we think there's some wiggle room, but we're going to drive towards trying to get warrant articles for January 10th.
We have to have the placeholders in by the 15th of December, though, correct?
Yeah, and that's what
Placeholders have to be in, just not the actual warrant article.
right, but they're saying the warrant articles are due by January 10th. So the placeholders we've already voted on that we're going to put in, but
Okay.
I'm just stating that while we've been told the warrant articles are due by January 10th, and it's a lot more. Dorianne, I don't know if you were on before when we had a little bit more time before they moved up town meeting.
I wasn't on then.
Okay. So it used to be we had a little bit more time. It's been very condensed with the town meeting moved up a month. So and it just makes it a terrible time
Take
when
that
people,
smile off your face.
people are on vacation and, so,
Keeps you on your toes, Andrew. Keeps you on your toes.
well, all of
By 2 months.
there's a lot of work that goes, it's just a tough time of year for all the prep work for town meeting, that's all. So, but there might be a little wiggle room for that. So, and then again, the MOU, we have that on the agenda so that the intent is to have the MOUs signed prior to going to town meeting. So if we have those drafts and we can, before we vote on the actual projects, we could, give them a draft of, say, here are the standard MOU requirements, and then here are the additional conditions we want put in there, and have everyone agree to it. Okay. Everyone okay if I move on to CPC expenditures?
Yes.
One question for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk now or wait to discuss anything about preservation restrictions?
Let's wait on that.
Okay, that's a whole meeting.
Yeah, no, and I just don't, because it's not called out specifically. If a certain group were to see that we went into a big discussion about it without them there, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. So let's put it on the next agenda item. But I can give you a brief update that Freddie and I had a long discussion with the library about a preservation restriction on the building. So, and I know I updated everyone before that things were starting to work. We actually met with, what was it, New England Historic? Is that who it was, Freddie?
Something
Right.
like that.
Yeah. To
Historic
talk
New
about,
England?
yeah, Historic New England, to preserve the library, which was put a preservation restriction on the library, which was part of the requirement from town approval for the project. So we'll get into that in more detail later, but as an update that it is in the process for that one. So the next one, CPC fiscal year 21 expenses. So this, we usually talk about this earlier, but because of COVID and lack of members, which again, so great to have a full committee. It's so nice to be able to schedule meetings and know we have wiggle room if people can't make it. But some of the expenses that we always vote on and approve are like the Community Preservation Coalition dues that we pay out of the admin funds. I think it's like $2,500. It's a small, it's not that small, but it's small compared to the overall projects that we're usually funding. And they are a great resource to leverage for projects and making sure we're towing the line and doing the right thing for things. So I was looking to see if we could approve the funding our participation in the coalition again for the next year.
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay, all those in favor? Mills, yes.
Aye.
Just
Murphy, yes.
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 Hanson, yes.
Beth, yes.
All right, so we got that approved. Thank you. The other piece is, I think we've voted on this in the past as well. Betsy, our diligent note taker, we want to keep her around so that none of us are scribing and no one wants to see my chicken scratch. It would be a motion to keep Betsy on for another year.
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. So I'll say my position and then I'm gonna name call everyone so we're not talking over each other. So Andrew Mills, yes. Dorian,
Maria Jasinski, yes.
Ben,
Yes.
Hanson,
David Joyner,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Hanson, yes.
Ann Fant, how you say that?
It's FAF, and yes.
And Mark Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And the last one too is also our diligent and ever knowledgeable consultant, Miss Gillespie.
Our institutional memory.
Well, not only that, but there's a lot of work for like prepping the applications, working with people to even get them to us. That Freddie works with Betsy a lot too to make that happen. And there are things that I just don't have time to get to as the chair that Freddie helps, like calling the coalition and getting clarification on things. So if and the way it's been structured before is there's how many hours, Freddie? Total? A week, a month? She's on mute again. Freddie,
Here's Harley. 20 plus 5 if needed, approved by the chair.
right. So 20 hours that would get used a month of Freddie's time. And if it was going to exceed it, it could be an additional 5. It could be flexible when the applications come in, like in the summer, it's not as much. But and if it was to exceed even the 25, then we'd all vote on it together. So, is there a motion to keep Freddie on the CPC as our consultant?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mills, any discussion? Mills is a yes. Dorian Drozinski,
Jasinski, yes.
Ben Smith,
Yes.
David Joyner,
Yes.
Jennifer Hansen,
Yes.
and
FAF, yes.
I'll get it eventually.
It's
And
a
Mark,
hard one.
Yes, as long as she brings her dog to every meeting.
Just think laugh with a faff.
you're just glad that Rory isn't barking yet, Mark. I know that.
That's pretty good, Dave.
All right. So review agenda and timelines for the March town meeting. So I know we had Betsy, you got to keep me honest here. We have the next meeting's the 15th, right? Of this 17th.
17.
Of December.
December 17th?
The 17th. Do you want the rest of the dates?
Yes,
Yes, please.
Okay, hold on. We have December 17th, 7 o'clock, January 13th, 7 o'clock, February 10th, 7 o'clock, March 10th, 7 o'clock, March 20th, before annual town meeting, time to be determined.
2 p.m. No.
1 p.m.
Lunch and dinner included, maybe breakfast.
If you bring it.
It was February 10th and then March 10th. Was that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I think I'm hopeful, that all those dates, we can get everything done and approved and get the warrant articles in. I just ask for everyone's flexibility. If, right now we're scheduled to meet after 3 days after when the warrant articles we're being told they have to be in. So I think Betsy, Freddie, and I'll work to see if, we can just keep that date and get it at the end of the week. I think that's typically what's happened in the past. But if there needs to be an adjustment, we'll get an email out to everyone or hopefully know before the meeting on December 17th. And at the next meeting, Betsy and Freddie, if you guys can invite the applicants back and schedule them again at the beginning of the meeting, and then we can go into the prior warrant articles from last year in deeper discussion. And I think if for those, we should probably at least notify those applicants that, hey, we're going to be reviewing these again just because we have new members. If they'd like to attend and listen, I want to be very transparent that, you know, they're being discussed again, not reviewed, but discussed again. And hopefully we'll have Aldo's answer by then on the letter from the whatever that group is out in Michigan or wherever it was.
Can I jump in, Andrew, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I kind of thought we were going to do the old applications at the following meeting, because if you have 3 applications with lots of questions, more than you did the first time, conceivably a half hour each. Do you think?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, is everyone else comfortable with that? That we
Yeah.
we wait until January 13th then to talk about the other ones? I don't want you to think I'm kicking the can down the road.
No, I think your townhouse discussion is going to take a long time.
What I had thought was what I thought we agreed to is I'll find out if there's any reason that we have to know before this warrant closes. But if they're already on and it's, you know, making some if those old warrant articles are already on the warrant and you have more flexibility time-wise with getting a warrant article in, that having them come after the fact, because trying to get through 5 applications in one meeting, I'm telling you, is not.
Yeah, no, that's as long as everyone's comfortable. And Dorian, I didn't hear what you said. I
I don't remember what I said.
as long as everyone's comfortable with that, we'll move the other 2 to the 13th.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? I know we ran a little longer than normal this evening. We had a lot to get through, but I appreciate it with everyone. Anything else?
Good.
Good job tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ben,
Thank you.
is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
There we go. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Mills, yes. Dorian,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Here we go. Appreciate it. Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
In a couple of days.
Luck with that dog.
Good luck with the dog. Yes.
You know, I'd like to kick them, but I would never.
Tim, thanks for sticking it out with us. Appreciate it.
Oh my God,
Bye-bye.
awesome.
Got it. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.